Let me ask you something. When we talk about historical injustice, do you think it only affects individuals who directly experienced it, or could it impact the descendants of those who suffered as well? For example, many people argue that systemic harm like slavery and segregation didn't just harm individuals, it affected entire generations, creating lasting disadvantages for their descendants. If policies like redlining, discriminatory practices in housing, and unequal access to education have affected people over time, isn't it possible that these effects continue to be felt today, even if those policies were implemented decades ago?
But how can an entire group be the victim of something that happened a long time ago? It seems like you're saying people should be compensated for something they didn't directly experience. That doesn't seem fair.
That's a valid point, but here's the thing. While it's true that individuals are the ones who directly experience harm, we also have to think about how the effects of historical injustices are passed down. We see this in how wealth, education, and opportunities are distributed today. The descendants of enslaved people didn't cause the harm, but they still live with the consequences. I understand the concern, but here's the thing. The legacy of historical injustice doesn't just hurt the people who were directly affected, it affects society as a whole. When certain communities were systematically excluded from opportunities like home ownership or access to quality education, the wealth gap between them and other groups grew, and that gap is still with us today. Society has benefited from these inequities. The nation's prosperity was built on the backs of enslaved people, and the advantages of that history continue to accumulate for some, while others are still dealing with the consequences. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 acknowledged that discrimination was a societal issue that needed to be addressed. Reparations work in a similar way. They're about fixing the systems that were set up to privilege some and disadvantage others.
But doesn't focusing on race-based policies just create division? Isn't the goal to abolish race-based systems and policies altogether, not reinforce them?
I get that concern, it's a common argument. But the issue isn't about reinforcing divisions, it's about acknowledging that race-based systems have existed. Ignoring these realities doesn't make them go away, it perpetuates inequality. If we want to move forward as a society, we need to acknowledge the systems of inequality that continue to affect people today. Shelby County v. Holder, 2013, shows us that while some race-based policies were no longer deemed necessary, the court still recognized the historical impact of those policies and how they shaped racial inequality today. Addressing past harm and acknowledging race-based policies isn't about creating division, it's about correcting long-standing imbalances.
So, you're saying reparations aren't about individual blame, but about fixing the systems that caused the harm in the first place?
Exactly. Reparations aren't about punishing people or assigning personal blame, they're about repairing systems that continue to cause harm today. In Griggs v. Duke Power Company, 1971, the court acknowledged that discriminatory hiring practices had long-term effects on Black Americans' ability to access jobs. We need to address those ongoing effects. Reparations are about correcting the systems that caused harm and ensuring a more equitable future for everyone.
But isn't this all just too complicated to solve? Won't it just create more problems than it fixes?
I hear you. It's a complex issue, but avoiding it doesn't make it go away. Reparations are a way of taking responsibility for the historical wrongs and creating a path toward healing. The longer we put off addressing these systemic issues, the longer it takes for us to move toward a fairer society. It's not about being perfect, it's about righting the wrongs that continue to hurt certain communities. Take Alexander v. Louisiana, 1972. Where the Supreme Court ruled that reparations were necessary for victims of racial discrimination. Society has to recognize that if we're going to create true equality, we can't ignore the legacies of past harms. Reparations are a necessary part of that process.